Welcome to Odoo Essentials. In this lesson, we'll go over basic accounting in Odoo. We'll discuss manually registering payments, setting up payment terms, and setting and launching follow-up actions on unpaid invoices. We'll start with registering payments. Let's click on the Accounting app and select Customer Invoices from the Sales tab. We'll select one of the open invoices from the list. Here in the top right-hand corner, we can see the state of the invoice. We can see the amount due at the bottom right-hand corner. To register a payment, click the green Register a Payment button. In the prompt, we'll select the payment method and the payment amount, which is set to the full amount by default, though you can change it. We'll also set the payment date and the memo. The memo is set to the invoice number by default. Then we can validate the payment. Once we validate the payment, the amount due at the bottom of the invoice has been changed to $0 and the payment has been logged here. You can click the Info button to see the details. The state of the invoice has also been changed to Paid here, as well as below in the chatter with a timestamp to show you when the payment was logged. We can also register a partial payment of the invoice. We'll duplicate the invoice to use as a demonstration. Note that when an invoice is first created, it will be in the draft state. An invoice will not be entered into your general ledger until you validate it. Now we'll click Register Payment again. Let's register a payment of $15. When we enter an amount less than the full amount of the invoice, the option for what to do with the difference becomes available. In this case, we still hope to collect the remaining amount, so let's leave Keep Open selected and validate the payment. We can see that the invoice is still in the open state, and the partial payment is logged here. The amount due is now $100. We can register another payment for the balance, and the second payment is also recorded at the bottom of the invoice. Because the amount due is now 0, the invoice has been moved to the state Paid. Now we'll go over setting up payment terms. To do this, select Payment Terms from the Configuration menu. This brings us to a list of predefined payment terms. Let's open one now. Each payment term has a name and description, which will be included on quotes and invoices. The globe icon indicates that the field is translatable. We'll cover this in more detail in a later lesson. Here we can add terms. This term describes a balance due 15 days after the invoice date. Let's click on this line to define the computation of these payment terms. This form already has the number of days until payment is due set to 15. The amount due can be the balance, or total remaining amount of the invoice, a percentage of the total invoice, or a fixed dollar amount. We can make the amount due either a number of days after the invoice date, a number of days after the end of the invoice month, or on the last day of the current or following month. We'll keep this term at 15 days. Now let's create an invoice to test out this payment term. Let's select an open invoice and duplicate it. We'll select the payment term of 15 days here. After checking that the other information on the invoice is correct, we can go ahead and click Validate. Now, our new custom payment terms will appear on the invoice form as well as the printed invoice. Next, let's create another payment term using a percentage of the invoice amount. For this example, we'll create a payment term of 50% of the invoice amount due at purchase with the balance due in 15 days. We'll call it 50% immediate plus balance after 15 days. We can add an additional description if necessary, and then set the calculation below. Here we set our first condition by selecting percentage as the term type, setting this to 50, and setting the due date to 0 days, requiring payment immediately. Next, hit Save and New to open an additional payment term. Here we will set the term to balance to collect the full remaining amount of the invoice, and the payment due date to 15 days after the invoice date. Let's save this new payment term and create an invoice. We will issue this invoice for a new customer and select the payment term we just created. Then add some products, maintenance, and consulting. Then we can save and validate the invoice. As we can see here, the due date shown on the invoice is the final due date in the payment term. To view the payments associated with this invoice, we can click on the customer record on the invoice here. On the associated customer record, we can click on the Overdue Payments tab to see any payments that are due for this account. We can see the initial 50% payment due today, as well as the payment on the second half due in 15 days. If a payment is overdue, the record line here will turn red. Let's now move on to setting up a follow-up action. This feature can be enabled in the configuration menu of the accounting app. Scroll down to Invoicing and Payments and enable Payment Follow-up Management. Now, in the configuration menu, we have a new option for follow-up levels. Clicking into this menu, we see that there is a default follow-up already pre-configured called Evolve, the name of our company. Opening the default follow-up policy, we see that it is made up of a series of tasks. We can select the first task, which is set to send an email when a payment is overdue by 15 days. The action has a title, options to perform the action manually, send an email, or send by standard mail. We can also modify the email template, including adding dynamic fields which automatically add the name of the customer, the company, and more. We'll cover email templates in more detail in a later lesson. The second reminder is set for payments overdue by 30 days, at which point an email will be sent automatically and a physical letter will be sent as well. The final follow-up action is set to trigger after 40 days. This action is set as manual action, which will allow you to assign an employee as the person responsible for the action. Let's create a follow-up action on a new invoice. We can go ahead and add a customer, a product, and set a due date to one in the past to make these payments overdue for demonstration purposes. Let's save this invoice and validate. Next, go to the Sales menu and select Customer Statements. Here we see that there is a filter by default for partners or customers with overdue invoices. This drop-down menu allows us to select a filter for payments in need of an action to complete a follow-up. We can scroll down through customer statements to see any invoices that are unpaid or overdue. Based on our defined follow-up actions, a follow-up action is required for payments more than 15 days overdue. In this case, ProfServe Consulting. From the Filter menu, let's select In Need of Action. After selecting this filter, we see that ProfServe is the only customer on this list, with the next action of Send First Reminder Email. From here, we can print a reminder letter or send an email. We can log a note if additional information is needed, such as a past communication with the customer. The note logged will be immediately added to the chatter of the customer's form. Going back to customer statements, we can also change the date of the follow-up. Let's click on 2 weeks here and click Save. If we refresh this page, we will see that there are no actions needed as we have moved the customer follow-up to 2 weeks from today. If we go to our customers list and locate ProfServe, we can see all overdue payments from the Overdue tab. At the top of this customer statement, we see a warning that no action is set and can click to put this back on the list if we decide a new follow-up needs to be scheduled. Returning to customer statements, we see that ProfServe is now back on this list, and we can set the next reminder to either automatic or manual. Clicking History shows each action performed on this customer statement, allowing traceability of our actions for future reference. We can also modify the automatic mail on the fly directly from the customer statement, entering some new text and clicking Save. Each invoice can be viewed directly from the drop-down menu on the customer statement if we are interested in seeing information such as the tax paid or the total amount of the invoice. From this menu, we can also view the journal entry to show which financial accounts were impacted by this sale, allowing your accountants to see transactions on a granular level. Lastly, we can change the expected payment date and add invoice notes directly from this menu. Here, let's set a new expected payment date and a customer note. This expected date will automatically be added on the same line as the initial due date under an Expected Payment Date column. If we view the invoice again, we will now see that the note we logged with this expected payment date is automatically added to the chatter below this customer's invoice. If we would like to halt any automatic actions on an invoice, such as when a customer payment is in dispute, we can click the Excluded checkbox next to that customer's invoice. This will prevent any additional emails from being automatically sent on this invoice until the option is deselected. This concludes our demonstration on payment follow-ups. Thanks for watching.